when talking about Montravius Adams, I talked about he was one of those guys that was like a big tease, and they frustrated you when you watched him because you saw flashes of first round potential and then extended stretches of disappearing or not having nearly the type of impact or production that they should. Caleb Brantley from Florida is the same type of guy. Here's a guy I look at, and he looks like an NFL defensive tackle. And at times, he plays like one of these backfield wrecking defensive tackles, one of these perfect three technique penetrators in a 4-3. He looks like that type of dude. He has moments where he looks like he's the real deal. But instead of just watching highlights and just brief moments of him, the more you watch him, the more you grow frustrated because, again, you want to see this more consistently. You want to see a guy that will game in and game out show the type of guy that he could be. And frankly, I just didn't see enough of that on film from Brantley to justify him being a first-round talent in this year's draft class. And in fact, not even a second round or third round talent. And here's why. Well, you look at a guy and you see Caleb Brantley with decent size, and in particular, what stands out is his burst and quickness. He's a really explosive athlete. I mean, really, really explosive. Would potentially be a super explosive pass rushing threat type in theory in a 3-4 as a defensive end or 4-3 as a defensive tackle. That athleticism, that burst is special out of a defensive tackle, and he has it. You know, he's a dude that's pretty strong too. You know, he's got decent size. He's a great athlete, and he's relatively strong too in terms of what shows up on film. So you look at him and you're like, this guy should dominate. This guy should have massive sack numbers, and he just doesn't. And the thing is you look at it, and he has pass rush upside. He has pass rush ability. But again, you talk about a guy where he has some of the techniques in place, but for some reason he just doesn't finish enough plays. He just doesn't, and it's frustrating. He's a solid run defender. Sometimes it's even hard to describe, frankly, and as I do this scouting report, it just kind of strikes me as to why I have Caleb Brantley graded where I do. Because he should be graded much, much higher. He should be the top interior lineman in this draft class, and he should be a top 20 pick, is what should be the case. But it just isn't. You look at him, he's not as good getting off of blocks as he probably should be. I think his hand punch is lacking. I think his arm usage in general is relatively lacking. He's not the most aware football player. At times he could play lost and he can get himself out of the play and he could have no clue on as to what is actually going on. His effort is pretty good. Could be a little better at times. I think sometimes that comes down to conditioning, or in his case, perhaps a lack of conditioning. But the lack of ability to finish plays. He's the type of guy, the epitome of he gets close, but he doesn't get all the way there. And especially when you're looking at a Florida defense that had two NFL corners on the outside in Quincy Wilson and Tease Tabor. And even you would argue the year before that when they had Vernon Hargraves too. This is a Florida defense that puts out NFL talent. You had Jared Davis and Alex Anzalone at the linebacker position. You have NFL talent all over the place. And these are the type of guys that should allow a Caleb Brantley to be single blocked, which he was a lot anyways, and really allow him to dominate games. And it just doesn't happen. And some of that, to me, perhaps comes down to work ethic, or in his case, a lack of work ethic. Some of it comes down to maturity, and in his case especially, a lack of maturity. It's a guy with some off-the-field concerns from the past, a guy who did not interview very well, a guy, that it's hard to really count on him to show up and play consistently game in and game out, and it's really, really frustrating. I've said that before, and I'll say it again. It's frustrating because this dude should be somebody. He should be one of these dudes in this draft class that I should be pumping full of smoke. He's one of these dudes that I should be ranting and raving about how people are crazy if they don't think he's a first-round talent. But instead, I'll be the type of guy that rants and raves about how anybody's crazy if they would think about taking him with the first-round pick. And I do not envision that happening. I'm not sure he even goes in the second round. This is not the greatest class of interior linemen. And in this class that is not that great. A guy like Caleb Brantley, similar to McGriddle McDowell, one of those two should have been the top guy in this class, and to me, neither one of them are. And that's disappointing. When you look at Caleb Brantley, he should be a guy that is so much more. He kind of reminds me of Nick Fairley in that way, in the sense of you see the possibility of potential of production out of him. You see the possibility of the potential of the pass rush. But it comes in bits and spurts and is never consistent. That's why you look at Nick Fairley. For a few years, he was getting one-year prove-it deals because teams would get these flashes with long, extended periods of not doing shit. That's kind of what I look at Caleb Brantley as. And we'll see ultimately what he becomes at the NFL level. But he's a dude that frankly needs to grow the fuck up, mature, work harder, because there is potential here. There is big-time potential here. But if he doesn't, he's going to be one of those guys we forget about in 2 or 3 years, other than looking at a team's draft history and he's just a blip in the radar and you say, oh, I barely remember that fucking dude. And that's not the type of guy from an athletic package standpoint that Caleb Brantley should be. This dude should have been a more dominant player at Florida, in particular with the talent that was around him on defense. And he just wasn't. And to me, that, along with some other things, are very, very concerning. If you couldn't dominate there, in the conference that you played in, granted a good conference, with great talent around you at all levels of the defense, why would I think you're going to contribute or make an impact at the NFL level?